That's me. There's an old saying that you've probably heard: man proposes, but God disposes. Or in other words, man's ways are not God's ways. And here's an illustration about that from something that happened to me recently. If you're a deacon faced with giving a homily, you plan ahead, way ahead. And until January the 15th, I thought I knew exactly what I would be preaching about today. I had checked the gospel readings for this weekend and found that it was to be the parable of the prodigal son, a beautiful lesson in forgiveness. I'd even read a couple of books about the parables that I'd checked out from our church library. So I was ready to start writing my homily, hoping to share with you the profound depths of this beautiful parable in a most memorable way. You were going to be so impressed. Then, my friend Bishop Jim informed me that he had changed the readings for this weekend to better sync with the theme of the small group session for this coming week, thereby sending me into a giant state of confusion. So much for my prodigal son homily on forgiveness. Now what was I going to preach about? Well, today, doing a complete 180, I'm going to talk about confusion. When I checked the new readings, this was when I knew I was in trouble. Here's an example. In today's gospel, Jesus said, "I came into this world for judgment, so that those who do not see might see, and those who do see might become blind." Some of the Pharisees who were with him heard this and said to him, "Surely we are not also blind, are we?" But now, and Jesus said to them, "If you were blind, you would have no sin. But now you are saying, 'We see,' so your sin remains." Okay, I mean, really, do any of you, like me, think this is just a little bit confusing? I need to backtrack now, just a little bit, because I have to confess that I live my life in a state of confusion. I'm confused about what clothes to wear to put on in the morning. What's the weather going to be like? Where am I going today? What will I be doing? What should I wear? I'm confused as about to what to fix for dinner tonight. Spaghetti? Soup? Leftovers? I'm confused as to why God chose me to be a deacon. I'm confused as to what he wants me to do with my life. In fact, you might say I find God confusing. Even in the Mass, we acknowledge that God is a mystery, when after the consecration we hear the words, "the mystery of faith." But every so often, in the midst of my confusion, I do see a glimmer of light, an aha moment. So I kept delving into these new scripture readings, looking for enlightenment. I learned that the focus for this coming week's small group sessions is how confusion is transcended by grace. So, beginning today with my homily, this might well become a whole week of confusion for all of us in the small groups as we work towards the light of understanding. You might want to bring a flashlight with you just in case. The episode of The Chosen for this coming week speaks of the confusion of the apostles about what Jesus says and does. They are confused about suffering and death, and what is the answer to life's mysteries. They're confused about their future roles. One character remarks that Jesus speaks words that unscramble a lifetime of mystery, and at the same time fill me with questions. Jesus warns his followers not to think like the Gentiles, as their ways are not his ways. That whoever would be in God's favor must first become a servant to others, and that they must suffer. This applies to us as well. We may be confused as to what God is asking of us, but we do know that in order to serve him, we must serve others. The workbook study guide for this coming week helps us with our own confusion. In it we read, "On the surface it seems strange that God's power is made perfect in weakness, hardships, suffering, in confusion. But when you really think about it, it makes sense. Our neediness forces us to look to the one who can meet our needs, which means our confusion is an opportunity to look to God. Today's first and second readings both speak about the light of God. In the first reading, Samuel learns not to judge from appearances, but to look to God for enlightenment, as God's ways are not our ways. Our ways all too often include greed, self-righteousness, inflated egos, the seeking of power, the pursuit of wealth, and the disregard of others. God's ways, on the other hand, are truth, goodness, service to others, humility, love, justice, and mercy. So this phrase, God's ways are not our ways, is actually the key to understanding what Jesus was saying. It's our aha moment. In our confusion, we must look to God to show us the way. In the second reading from the letter to the Ephesians, St. Paul admonishes us to live as children of the light, to live in goodness and righteousness and truth. In this letter to the Ephesians, Paul writes, "Everything exposed by light becomes visible, and everything that becomes visible is light. Therefore it says, 'Awake, O sleeper, and arise from the dead, and Christ will give you light.'" John's Gospel today expands the first and second readings. It tells of Jesus giving sight to a blind man, and by extension that he will cure our blindness, our confusion, and bring us to the holy light, the light of understanding. It also speaks about the Pharisees who were so blind to Christ, the Messiah, that they could not see the miracle of the healing of the blind man that was right in front of their noses. I think that all too often we too behave like Pharisees. We think that we are good people, but are all too willing to judge others and to consider ourselves superior to them. God shows himself to us, but we look away. The light is there, but we close our eyes. In our confusion, we allow ourselves to become distracted. So, what should we do? We need to pray to God to bring clarity to our thoughts and emotions. Instead of stumbling around in our confusion, we need to pray for his grace to see our way through the darkness of despair and confusion and into the light, into our aha moment. It is, as Jesus tells us, when we accept that we do not see, only then will we see. And to paraphrase St. Paul, "Awake, O sinner, and arise from the darkness of confusion, and Christ will give you light." God doesn't ask that we understand fully, but only to trust him, to follow him, and to have faith. And you know what? I think that's enough. Now, if only I could figure out what to fix for dinner tonight. Takeout.